Now it's a challenging one, and I hope that I don't put you in a bad position.
And a colleague of mine, she used to say cheap but cheerful. So zero investment with the greatest output.
What is the biggest disconnect that you see between what schools teach and what hotels actually need?
And others are a bit more, there you are. Here's your schedule. Here's your key, whatever. And off you go. First day, straight away at reception. 30 minutes after you arrived at the hotel, and you're already having the first guest shouting to you at reception. Okay? I think that is the worst impact that this could have on someone, not being ready for that.
If you could redesign hospitality education, what would the curriculum of the future look like?
You have very short intervals of practical and theory. So you would have maybe 2 weeks of work and then 2 weeks of classes and then 2 weeks of work. So the intervals are shorter. So what you learned yesterday or last week in class, today you're already applying for the job.
What's up, hospitality? Hotel operators believe that they will find all the answers about their guest preferences through first-party data on their marketing channels, RMS, on research. But if I told you that the most qualified data is much closer than you think? Today, we are rethinking hotel training. Why your housekeepers hold the key to guest experience. For that, we are joined by Krebs, a hospitality educator at Roches, Marbella, a former rooms division leader with years of experience across Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia, and a consultant who believes the future of hotel operation starts with the people we often overlook, our housekeepers. Combines global experience, sharp operational intelligence, and a deep passion for developing the next generation of hoteliers. Julia, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you, to meet you again now online. We first met in Marbella at Le Roche. You showed me that beautiful campus that you guys work at. It was awesome.
No, it was fun. It was fun.
And Julia, you start your hospitality journey very, very young at 16, housekeeping. What did that experience teach you about humility, service, and hospitality in general?
I think the sheer amount of, or the combination of physical labor and the intensity of the stress effectively of, needing to perform and having the rooms perfectly cleaned and obviously on time, and all the small details that which I didn't know at the time, obviously you had to pay attention to in terms of setting up the right amenities and, guest preferences, repeat customers that come back and they want things organized a certain way. And the sheer overload of the amount of staff, the team size, the technicality of equipment and chemicals and, cleaning procedures, orders. I mean, I was still quite young. I was 16 and I was like, it was such overload and a total world that came crashing down on me in the good sense, no, because it was obviously an extreme steep learning curve and very, very quick, because first day right away, you go there, you shadow the cleaner, let's go. Now the two of you go and you start carrying beds and bring linen and laundry and different towels. I had no clue that there was, face towels and hand towels and bath towels. And for me, there was, one towel for your body and one towel for your head at home. So very simple in that sense. No, the first time you get the behind the curtain experience from a hotel, because normally like you come into a room and it's all nicely presented and it's done. So I really quickly developed this immense respect to all the mainly ladies working in the department, and the sharpness of how they would approach the task as well. When they got, the list in the morning from the supervisor and it said 35 rooms to clean today, and they didn't flinch, because that's what they had to do, and they got the job done in the time that they had to get it done. So I was very much impressed with that, and that obviously shows dedication to service, that approach.
And how did you end up as a housekeeper at 16?
I want to say I was forced, but my mother pushed me into getting a job basically, and it started off as a summer job, but then continued on because she said, you're not going to be a couch potato and you need to do something and you keep talking about hotels and that you like working there or that you want to work there, well, go and check it out, right? Go and do for summer job few weeks. And when you come back and you still tell me that you want to do it, we can talk further. Later you can go to study that, or you may start working first and then you study later. But first you go, and my mom was always like, first try and error. You try it out, you test it. If you like it, we continue. If not, we redirect, right? So that's what I basically ended up doing. I got into the Hilton. I went to reception and I said, okay, I would like to have a summer job here. Who do I need to talk to? And they said, okay, you need to go to HR. And then I went to HR and they said, okay, you can either do stewarding or housekeeping. So then I said, okay, I'll do housekeeping. Was closer, no, like at home you need to do some household chores. So I was like, okay, I think I have more of an idea what's going on there. So let's do that. And that's the story.
Okay, so you had that experience, but you end up going across Asia and working about 6 years. Yeah, like I have Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia.
Mm-hmm.
And that must been an experience. Like, how old were you when you were there?
I went there straight after university. So after working for a bit, I did then, university and or like hospitality degree. And then I was recruited in the graduation interviews, no, when you start setting up your future after graduation. And at the time it was Orient Express, now, rebranded with Belmont. And they were like, okay, we can send you to, well, they had Doha, Laos, no, not Doha, Italy, Laos, and I can't remember the third location now, but another one. And I was like, well, I always want to go to Asia, so let's go all the way. Let's go there directly. They were like, okay, please make sure you arrive on, I still remember to this day, on the 21st of July, 2014.
For that summer.
And that was it, basically. So then they were like, here's your contract. And we booked the flights and off you go. That's how I ended up there.
That's cool. And when you're doing so you start working at 16 in housekeeping and then you did your university degree. When you were studying, what was your feeling about hospitality back then after having some experience already working? What was like triggering you? What was making you excited about graduating and actually getting your degree?
I think the possibility, I saw it more a bit of a stepping stone in terms of, well, you need to obviously grow your career and you get your years of experience in, but at a certain level, you may need certain degree knowledge in the sense of management, right? So it was more for me to understand more the business aspects of it and the management in order to then say, okay, once I've done now a couple of more years, that it will help me once I reach an assistant manager management position with the team leading, as well as obviously management tasks that you need to do, a budget, a forecast, numbers, KPIs, and all of that, which you sometimes don't see or get to know as quickly when you're purely from an operational background, or it takes you maybe a little bit longer in that sense. Not because I wanted a shortcut, but just to be ready when the time comes and to have that already a little bit there as a background, let's say, and then build it more with the operational experience and as you grow into a specific role, but not having none of it. So that was more my importance, not to be like, oh, I have a degree, and you wave the magic wand, but to have that. I mean, also having had the opportunity to do it, of course, it's some, unfortunately, people cannot have. And then to be, okay, I have understanding already because I've heard about this, so I know this technique, or I have that knowledge. Let's now, apply it or make it more practical and experience it in that sense.
And if I would take you back like 16 years old, already dreaming about the hotels, then work in a hotel, then studying a degree in hospitality, then traveling to Asia to experience another angle of hospitality. What hospitality means to you?
I think it's people for people, or people with people at the end of the day. So I think it has to do that at the end of the day, we're looking for the purest connection we could ever have had, not like between mother and baby or father and child, that purest love and warmth that we have when we're very, very small. And I think that's what we always are looking for again and again in any sort of interaction or transaction, in the sense that we have and when we communicate with people, when we meet them, if it's for business or being then friends, pleasure, etc. So I think that's what we're always looking for in others and what we want to give. And I think that's the essence at the end of the day. And you can find that the most in hospitality to that extent. That's why hospitality is always everywhere. And that's purely, and that's what I have seen, no? When I was in Laos, for example, the pure nature of service, like it doesn't cost them anything. It doesn't bother them. It's just there. It's their nature, whether they are with their family members and they service them, or with guests, or between you as their manager and to an extent and the staff as a team. So it's always just there, and it's just natural. You don't have to tell them to smile or to direct them to, you know, be genuine and warm and all these kind of things. And that was not a shocker, if you want to exaggerate, but that was really like, I always thought that that was somewhere there, or that, you know, it is around us. And I really felt it. I really saw it. And you start to adopt it. Like, it's impossible for you not it's rub off on you, right? And you take it with you.
So the cultural hospitality is maybe more important than educational hospitality. Is that what I understood?
Yeah, somewhat. I think the importance lies there, or the scale, the weight should be more on that side. There's less we need to, or less we can do with teaching to an extent, because sometimes you can try to train and teach someone for many, many years and they will only reach a certain level because obviously of their character and of who they are, which is acceptable. And then there's somebody else who will excel on that side a lot more. Not that they need to compensate each other, but they have more of that natural gift. And not everybody has the same.
Super interesting. You've said that I follow you on LinkedIn and I love your posts, right? Like, because you can have that ability. And if you're not following Julia, please do so, because you have that unique point of view, right? Like, you have the experience of doing the job of working. You do consulting today. So you speak to hoteliers, you speak to managers, and you have a classroom. And what I love the most is that you bring the questions that you present to your general managers and you present to your students and you compare them both. And I love that. So that's just a little plug here. But you've said on LinkedIn that housekeeping is the protector of privacy and the eyes of the hotel. When did you realize that this invisible, basically, department holds so much operational intelligence?
I think pretty much also one of the experience again from Asia is that I was impressed and in the beginning also again taken away from the level of detail of attention to small things that they would notice. They would be probably one of the first ones to tell us when the guest was not feeling well. Mainly, let's say maybe they had eaten something bad and, you know, they were not feeling well, and they were like, I think we should ask them if they're okay, and if they maybe need some medical assistance, or if they just want a plain rice soup for today, and, you know, they will feel better afterwards. And then their attention to how the guests like certain things, you know, arranged in the room, for example, and they would notice that sometimes a lot of guests would put a lot of towels on the floor because we had these beautiful wooden floors, and they obviously can be very slippery, so they wanted to no walk. So I'm like, okay, let's put in some extra small carpets that we had sometimes around, and let's lay them in the room. And they would just, you know, do it, and then they would just tell me later about it. Like, we put the carpets in room 101, whatever it was. And I was like, in the beginning, why are you putting carpets there? And like, then they explained why. And then later it was just, we put the carpets. So it became a normal thing that they would just pick up on small things, or the way they would pay attention to arranging a room for a family, for example, with children, very much different than to just a regular couple, let's say. And taking care, like they always had in the suite, we had very high bedside tables, so they would replace them with other ones because they're at the perfect height for a child to run into on the eye level. So, okay, family's coming, we need to change the tables. And these are the small things that I mean, that they know people so well that they may not have even met yet, but just because they have a certain criteria, and then be later on to really reflect back on, and I won't say pages and pages, but recording what the preference of the guest was and remembering it very dearly when they would return. And there was a couple that would come back every November and they would stay for 1 month, and it was like, you know, the holy Bible of their stay. And they would go through all these arrangements again. And then of course there was always for F&B, etc., but maybe just for housekeeping focus now. And it was just that whole scenery, and we didn't have to do anything. Like, it was just natural. They would just do it, and it was not something we had to prompt them to do it, in a sense. Maybe more the record keeping, because again, it's something more technically speaking, but they would just immediately notice it and sense it.
All right. And why it's not everywhere like this?
That's a good question. I don't think I will be able to really answer it fully. I think in this particular sense, and is not because I want to only, let's say, praise Belmont in that extent, or at the time Orient Express, they were always extremely flexible in the application of certain standards. So of course we have standards that are important because obviously we need to ensure a certain sequence of service and level of service. And the LQA and mystery guest rating was always very important, not to get the highest scores. Like the target was always 93 and above, for example. And you can't do that without any sort of documentation and guidelines on standards. But it was never so restricting that you could not go off script or, find a different path for the guest. So it obviously we know that during check-in, you need to ask for the passport, it is that. But does it have to be always in that sequence? Can I not ask for the passport at the very end once the guest has asked me all their questions because they just arrived, they're so excited and they want to know everything? Why do I need to interrupt that conversation by, oh, sorry, we need to do paperwork and I need your passport and this and that. So just go with the flow, whatever they want. Some guests, they also said like, you know what, we would like to have lunch first. Can we do check-in after? Sure. I mean, why do we need to do all the processes in a certain order of events? We still get to the same outcome. Check-in will be completed and we will have all the documents, but it can be a free flow. And I think that was the key there, combined with that Asian hospitality that let them be so free and empowered that they would never have to worry that, I don't know, even GM would question them taking a certain action for a guest. That they needed to not always get the approval.
That's super interesting. So in the end, it's culture. It's about the hotel culture. Amazing. You worked in hotels again. You teach at Le Roche, Marbella, and you consult. What is the biggest disconnect that you see between what schools teach and what hotels actually need?
I think the disruptor here or the disturber is that I feel always there's a lot of time pressure nowadays with almost anything you do. And we tend to end up rushing things a lot. Obviously, certain things can be efficient and done fast, and other things would always require a bit more time. And in that sense, attention of detail and, like, again, feeling between each other, like let the guest arrive, let it sink in, give them a minute or two, and then. So we tend to be very hustled in many things we do. And I think especially for a young person here as a student, coming from a classroom environment where, of course, mistakes can happen and no problem, and we take more time and we explain again, being thrown into the complete opposite. No, it can't be more opposite than an actual hotel operation in terms of craziness and noises and everything is going on at the same time. I think that is the worst in a sense, maybe it's a bad word, but the worst impact that this could have on someone, not being ready for that. And that again comes down to character a bit, obviously, if you can face it well or not. But here, certain companies do it very well, the way they do onboarding, the way they take time to make the trainee familiar with the hotel and, go through different departments for a couple of days and be really settled and know everything well. And then they start, working, shadowing people, and then later hopefully work on their own. And others are a bit more, there you are, here's your schedule, here's your key, whatever, and off you go. First day, straight away at reception, 30 minutes after you arrived at the hotel. And you're already having the first guest shouting to you at reception and just being very dramatic. So I think that in our sense, we go to both extremes on both ends with our classroom experience and with the actual real life scenario. And I think that's very unique, which can be very beautiful because it can make the best outcome or it can be the worst. I don't think you have that experience somewhere else if you're studying math or physics or biology, right? You don't have this extreme end or scale of things.
And how can actually hotels do something different about that? It's just slowing down and taking a better onboarding experience, or is there something else that they can still? I feel, let me open parentheses, I feel that when hotels receive students that are coming from university in an environment that not everyone comes from university. A lot of the employees are they learn on the trade. Apparently, there is an extra responsibility on the student. Like, you study it to do this, you should be ready.
Yeah.
Is that when you get in touch with your students, is something that they relate to?
Yes, some experiences are that still, where they say, like the typical stereotype is like, you come from university and you think you know it all, but I've been doing this for 20 years, so obviously I know it better, or I know more about it, which is to an extent true in operational terms. Yes, you do more than me. And there's people out there that know more than me today, obviously. But it's about the understanding, not that they come to replace you or they're going to steal your job, because if that's the mindset in any work environment, we're not going to get anywhere. If you are not building up people to, yes, eventually replace you, you're not going to go anywhere either, right? If you need to prepare your next career move, you're not going to be promoted if your manager feels that you are irreplaceable in that sense that there's nobody who can step up and fulfill your role. So I think it's very obviously old-fashioned way of thinking. But the problem could be a little bit solved with onboarding, but I think maybe also, and some hotel companies do it more, they redesign the approach to an internship, or they, let's say, have, in our case, we have very good relationships with many companies, obviously. When they come for interviews, etc., they spend a little bit of time with our career services and with us to understand also a bit more, okay, so what's the approach in the classroom? What are the certain learning outcomes? Let's say what we actually discuss with the students. How is theory related to a practical experience? So they understand, or they can make more reference of it as well, probably, and apply it better. No? If you say like, look, you have seen X in the classroom, this is how X is now done here with us. That, I think, is somehow the way forward. I understand that for some corporations, some change, this is very difficult because obviously they're very, very large companies. And for others, they may have an advantage here because they're smaller and they're not spread this thin in that regard.
And Julia, in your consulting work, you often highlight the housekeeping data as intelligence. Can you walk us through how hotels can actually extract useful insights from the housekeeping teams, even without any fancy technology or anything? How can that data reach the decision makers?
I mean, I don't want to say I'm anti-tech, obviously that's a lie, but I'm always for the least amount of technology in the sense of we don't need to complicate it with it. Sometimes we need it, but sometimes no. And a colleague of mine, she used to say cheap but cheerful. So zero investment with the greatest output. And I think that's the case. So if we would be spending some time in a certain housekeeping briefing, and one GM I worked with, who I treasure a lot, he used to sometimes just randomly pop into our department meetings, right? He would just walk in and be like, okay, what are we talking about today? And he would sit down and he would listen and start observing things. And he would go to housekeeping and he would listen to certain things that they would share. And then they would take note of it. I mean, they had a huge whiteboard and they would always write it on the whiteboard, and things that would keep reoccurring that, were just tracked in terms of this is happening the most and this is happening the second most, like the amenity consumption, for example. There's one nice story on this where the housekeeping manager kept bringing the topic of the wooden floors being destroyed because of the mosquito spray that the guests would use. Because you know how you spray yourself and then obviously it sprays around you and it goes onto the floors, which were beautiful wooden floors that were so delicate because they had to be polished and vanished, and they would get these little bubbles on top. What is the normal thing you do? Maintenance, go, sand it off, vanish it again, polish it, ready to go. It takes a day, half a day, and then the room is back in service, no? But no, she was like, well, why don't we try to find a replacement mosquito spray that we give to the guests for free so they can use it, and then we will not have this issue anymore. And eventually, obviously, then when you compare the numbers, you notice that you will spend less money on buying 2 bottles of mosquito spray per room that you just put there as a free amenity, than always replacing or fixing up the floors. So that's what I mean with like little things. If you just listen a bit further, or not just be like, okay, just fix the problem or fix the issue and let's get back to selling the rooms or putting it back in service, then you can probably find more long-term approaches or strategies and decisions that you can make there. But that, I guess, works if people can then listen to you. And that's all she mentioned in the meeting. She didn't come with numbers or, she didn't have a pitch prepared, and she was just like, can we not just try to find that? So we did. So that's what I mean. I think it's just like I said, tracking things first. It was very good how she always wrote things on the board that would happen the most. And then things that happen, let's say 10 times, were then looked into further. And sometimes it's just random things that happen and it's okay. But that's how you extract this information that will make you A, financially better, and B, operationally more efficient.
But now again, you bring that information to the board, right? When that information was brought in to the board, was it in the end of the day, or it was in the beginning of the day when they are having the first meeting? And how did they take these notes? They would take notes, pencil and paper, or how that information flow from the problem to the manager?
Mm-hmm. And there it was very simple. We had to be creative in a sense that we had a lot of staff that was or is illiterate. So we obviously didn't have a lot of staff members that could read and write in their own language, yet alone in English. So we had to come up with different ways of doing it. So in this case, we had also small pictures of certain things, and they could just, like a simple tick below the picture, as in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once we, let's say, crack the code of like, okay, let's just count the things first. And then she would be able to write a report because obviously she was the most skilled in that sense. And they would just share mainly verbally this information in the handover meetings that they had in the department every day, of course. And she would then bring that to the morning meeting when all department heads sit together and then discuss that or bring it forward with GM. And then, of course, sometimes they had side conversations about it when it was just her and GM discussing the operational department issues. But she would share it in the meeting saying like, okay, we have again counted XYZ, or we have found this and that. And it was also when we redesigned the amenity sets and things like that. So that's how we would then pick topics or projects, let's say, to implement or to investigate first if it's feasible to do and then execute. Yeah.
That's awesome. And you talk about staff, like we talk in general about a staff shortage, right? It's something that we cannot run away. Even though some departments, people say that no, we are fine now. But when it comes to housekeeping here in Europe, seems to be a problem still. You share sometimes that the issue is not hiring, but repositioning. Why is that? Can you explain what that means and show me an example of that, please?
So I think that it is simple, like in any type of business or as in any management position, to just blame the external circumstances. The labor market is bad. We cannot find skilled workers, like you just basically described that. And depending on where we are, we have more issues of some sort than in others. Fair enough. That's probably still always reasonable, and it's not an excuse, but it's acceptable. But then at the same time, it is key to find people within. It's not always that we need to replace from the outside. So again, trainees are a good option, right? And then we have students as well that then are told, so when you graduate, come back and we give you a position, one option. Or that you obviously see within your teams, are they all where they should be? Are they really bringing the full potential? Because A, they could be very unhappy with what they do, or B, they could just basically be better contributing somewhere else because they might be multi-skilled, right? And that's, I think, the key. There's a interview that I saw, and to give you an example, a few months ago of a hotel that is very famous in Germany. It's a family-run hotel and very traditional, yet now with a modern approach because the daughter is now taking over. And they have a very, let's say, old name and a lot of heritage with them, but they like to do things a bit more modern. So they have like a TikTok channel and things. So they go all out there. So she said, in order to really do this well and to make your staff feel appreciated, once they're unhappy in the current position that they're in, promotion is not always a solution. Find them another place in your business. So she had a barman that, for health reasons, stopped drinking alcohol and became very, I don't want to say against, but basically he was feeling bad or worse every day when he had to serve alcohol to the guests or make cocktails. And he was very unhappy with it. And then she noticed it as well, or the manager noticed it and brought it forward. And she said, like, okay, what should we do then? What can we do? Because obviously what we do, we fire him or we tell him to quit because obviously he's not doing his job, right? You're in the bar to make drinks. And he said, well, now that I'm into this more health part of my life and wellness, I would like to maybe work in the spa, but I don't have any qualification because obviously my background is F&B. So no problem. We'll make space for you somehow in the spa. And they actually also sponsored him some kind of certification or course. I'm not really remembering anymore what it was, for him to be a certified kind of like wellness coach. So it's about, sound healing and meditation, yoga, that kind of thing. So they switched into position and then they hired somebody else to replace him at the bar, somebody who was perfectly happy making drinks to the guests. So that's what I mean with repositioning. If you can find somebody who has been with you for 10, 15 years, knows your business so well, it's such a key asset. It would be a pity to lose someone over the fact like, well, you're now in a position that no longer suits you. Have luck. Being very sarcastic now, but that's the approach behind. If you have that leadership, that's a beautiful story, I think, and that's, I think, possible in many options. Why not moving certain key senior members somewhere else if that fits and it brings value to the structure of the business, and then replace other roles? And yes, hire fresh blood as well, and shape things in both directions better.
And as we're speaking about repositioning, I had a very interesting conversation with a Gen Z specialist, right? And he was speaking about repurposing job descriptions, mainly in hospitality, to job missions. And that Gen Z, they are looking for a mission. So if we can repurpose that, that would be like very interesting. How could we transform housekeeping into a mission inside the hotel.
Yeah, that's why I call them also intelligence. No, it's a bit like James Bond, like operating behind. Like also like Aman has this signature moonshine service, right? Where there's like a secret door where the staff enters into your room or villa most of the time, and then services and exits. Like they never go through the front door of your room. So like they take it to the next level in that sense. No, and it's always done behind the scenes and you never see us. We personally don't like to the extent. I mean, they should be visible. I mean, they should be there. They should be seen and greeted and given a face as well in that sense, because a lot of people appreciate housekeeping a lot for the cleaning task that they do, which is a very heavy job. So I think we need to maybe really make them, like I said, part of the guest journey or the guest service experience. So they have their mission in the whole service sequence, which is obviously mainly the cleanliness. But if we're again talking about turn down service, and that also was something that I liked there a lot in, also we did that in the hotel in Cambodia, for example. Housekeeping had like a little logbook for turn down service requests. So guests could inform if they prefer at 6 p.m. before they would go out for dinner or a little bit later once they have gotten ready and they were having dinner. So there was like different time slots. That helped, of course, with organization and distribution of team members, but they would then share this logbook with front desk and the drivers specifically, because we had a shuttle service to bring guests to town to go to restaurants. So they could see if a lot of turn down requests were at 6 p.m., probably the majority of guests would take a shuttle around 6:30. So they could plan the shuttle and the number of cars according to that. And then also, again, for the pickup, etc. So then if they would be on the way back, they would call and make sure the turn-on service was done, right? So that's what I mean with that. Give them the role, give them the mission of fulfilling every single part of their service to that perfect outcome, let's say.
Yeah, that's cool. Like your mission is to serve the guests in the best way possible. So understand what your position is to make that happen. That's I love that. If you, like our listeners here, GMs, hotel managers, like owners and department heads, right? Like, if you could give them 3 actionable steps to make their hotel a better place for both the guest and the staff, something that they could do tomorrow without a lot of research, basically simple steps, what would they be?
Oh, only 3? No, I really need to
Now
give
you can give more.
I think based like kind of the conversation we had for now is the empowerment to the team to an extent. Like I said, no, they didn't ask or need to ask me or whoever to approve their action. I mean, Ritz-Carlton always does it with, you have $2,000 a day to, make any guest happy. I don't think it needs to have that amount of money behind it, right? It could just be make the most actionable impact towards a guest, and without necessarily always wondering, oh, if I do that, am I going to be told off later by my manager because I didn't follow all the standards, or I did not follow the sequence of things, but the guest is happy, right? Or vice versa in that sense. So I think the empowerment, and I had this as well many times to my staff members, they would come and report a complaint, and I told them, okay, so what should we do? And they first would look at me and say, like, but what do you think the guest would like us to do now? What should be the compensation for their complaint? And I'd say, no, I think yesterday they wanted to have some cocktails by the pool. And I think they really like it. And I say, okay, suggest that. Invite them again for cocktails by the pool. And if you want, you can join them for a chat. So and then you now go and tell this to the guests. They don't need to see me because you are empowered enough to take the action and communicate that to the guests. I mean, unless they want to see me, but you are the one they have complained to, or they've brought it forward. You are the one solving it for them. Not like the whole action follow-up process should be done by that person in that sequence. And other things, I think like this GM did very well to go and check into other departments, and whether it's just participating in a meeting here and there or spending some more time in departments and understanding better how they work together. And we also in the hotel in Laos, we did a little cross training for the managers. So we sent the spa manager to housekeeping and the restaurant manager to the spa, and for them to experience for couple of days here and there how other departments are also run and understand each other better. So I think that exchange is very important, and obviously having that open culture to do so. And other things, as we said before as well, I think we sometimes may overcomplicate our life with that everything needs to be documented, everything needs to be in a report and presentable, which when the time comes, if we're talking about to the big bosses, may be the case, true. But if we need to understand the agility of a situation and how quick we need to react to something, I don't think we need to be hung up on paperwork or administrative things and systems. And so like we did a little whiteboard, write it down there, right? Or my front office team, they would write things on the whiteboard that they noticed that the guests said or did, and they like it or dislike it. So we had like a plus and minus on the board. So we were trying to collect like guest feedback on excursions, etc. And that doesn't have to be a sophisticated thing on its own, but it has value. It gives you information. And I think that's the important thing.
How deep should be the training? How long should be the training? And if we should be training about mission and having that full onboarding experience, or as many hotels here in the Czech Republic, for example, do, they just basically outsource housekeeping.
Mm-hmm.
And they have people that they never see again, probably. They just coming in and out. So I see advantages and problems on both sides of the equation. Yeah. What's your take on that?
True. I mean, outsourcing gets rid of a lot of problems for you effectively, and you don't have to worry about somebody being sick and not being able to fulfill the workload, etc. I'm sure you can still fulfill a standard of cleanliness, etc. That's true. And you can still deliver an experience to a guest, for sure. If you want to make them grow as a team and be, let's say, better, more efficient and more appreciated, I think it's little things. It needs to be a mix of take care of yourself, not take care of your body. So, remember, like, don't bend down a certain way, you're going to strain your back and these kind of things, and giving them the proper tools and equipment. So that's one part. Another thing is keep thinking or checking if you can find better chemicals or better equipment to do something as well, because then that will make their job easier as well and they feel appreciated. I mean, don't expect me to mop well if you give me a broken mop. Those kind of things. Now, these are very basic, but sometimes we really ignore that because we just keep doing things, or we things are broken and we'll fix it later, or we buy new next budget, right? But that doesn't work like that, especially in housekeeping, when we have to cover such a huge surface and area in a property. And then I think it's not that they need, unless they're a young staff member, a junior staff member, so much training on the procedures and the job that will eventually come. And especially if you do a shadowing system where and especially in housekeeping, I think you should always clean in a team because you're not lonely and you more depend on each other. You can divide tasks and you feel more productive. I think they need more training in the sense of, for example, we had to incorporate a lot more English training to those staff members, so they would be able to respond to the guest saying, "Oh, I need more soap," or "I want shampoo." So they could not just be like, "Here's the bottle," reply with a sentence. It doesn't have to be, "Thank you, Mr., Mrs., da, da, da," the most beautiful way of saying it, but "There you go, sir. Thank you." Small details like that. And we're talking about the purest form of service and hospitality there, right? But obviously very constrained and limited in terms of skill set. In other areas like Czech Republic, we will not have that issue because people have a different level of education and experience already. But there again, more things like, what kind of training skill would you like to develop further? And somebody in housekeeping could also say, well, I want to do a language course, or I would like to, learn more about other departments, or I'm also interested in kitchen. So giving them more, to an extent, freedom to choose certain trainings, as long as they do train in something. You see what I mean? It's not just without any purpose.
Yeah. And let's think about the future now, when time is flying here, because we are in a very interesting time in history, and you are in a very interesting position in life, right? You talk to the old school and you talk to the new school. So with that in mind, 2 questions in one. What excites you the most for this next decade in hospitality?
Oh.
And what freaks you out the most? What scares you the most for this future in hospitality?
What excites me probably is that I feel that to an extent, for a very long time, we're coming the closest to really understanding what personalization means, and the small meaning, and I don't mean this in a bad way, of luxury, like how simple luxury and an amazing experience can be. When guests want to go to a quiet hotel where there's no music and no internet and no distraction, I just want to be in peace and quiet. I want to disconnect. Don't talk to me. If that's your luxury, there you go. Which was never really like in the cards. Like there would always be music in the lobby and, things happening, because that's how we construct a hotel in our minds, right? That's the ambience, the experience. And in many other ways. Now, this is just one example, because I guess I really want a quiet break. That's why I keep thinking about these things. But I think that's an interesting path, and we do understand the relevance of a certain SOP and standard, but that we give enough freedom to interpret. So that we finally let go of this, the typical old school image. I mean, I don't know if you agree, like a person in a suit, that's a reception, no, that's the receptionist. No, the person doesn't have to necessarily wear suited and booted with a tie, right? Because now we have many gyms without a tie in shorts and a resort. So why the staff members cannot be the same or represent that feeling? What freaks me out a bit, I think, is yeah, again, there's still the rapidness of certain things when we say like, well, if you are having a certain expectation of experience, that means things need to slow down. And I think that's not only in our industry, that's obviously in many areas in our life, but I think we are lacking the essence, the time of going through that. So if the guest is looking for it, but we cannot provide it yet, how can we ask them to reciprocate or to slow down and experience it really? So I think that's is an issue when, especially when we're talking about technology advancement, when you're pushing certain things forward, that may not be received as well as it could be.
Yeah, the speed of things is very scary indeed, indeed. And if you could, now is a challenging one, and I hope that I don't put you in a bad position. If you could redesign hospitality education, what would the curriculum of the future look like?
I would say two things, a little bit kind of, let's say back to basics in a sense that we have, obviously in Germany, we have this apprenticeship system where you have very short intervals of practical and theory. So you would have maybe 2 weeks of work and then 2 weeks of classes and then 2 weeks of work. So the intervals are shorter. So what you learned yesterday or last week in class, today you're already applying it in the job. So we are really forming the skills more parallel than just like we kind of have here, 6 months on campus, 6 months internship, which again, you can create the same output, the same learning outcomes, but I think sometimes the intervals could be shorter. And at the same time, I think more the option to customize certain things, like again, in a hospitality business degree, accounting, unfortunately, sorry, people, is non-negotiable, right? We need to know this. But at the same time, if we could give more flexibility or more election of courses you can choose. So you have 5 core courses as an example, and then you need to choose, I don't know, 10 additional courses to fill your curriculum. But here you can choose based more on your interest, or if you want to be a future entrepreneur, or if you're more again into wellness, or whatever else obviously more speaks to you. I was maybe, Gen Z, like you mentioned, that mission. So your mission would be, well, you complete the degree, but within that mission, you have certain side missions, no? So you can complete all the missions, or once you complete all the missions, you complete the degree. And I think that could be a good idea.
Do you think that AI will change a lot the way that we educate people?
Yes, and it already is. I mean, it is already in our classroom every day. I have people taking notes with AI every single time I speak to them, which is not a bad thing necessarily, right? I tell them, like, if you take notes with it, or if you do a study guide or mind map, if it makes you more efficient in the way you consume the knowledge and you retain it, no problem. I mean, I use it myself. I use AI as well for certain things, or because I want to test certain, I let the AI sometimes battle each other. I want to see different, outputs and see what would be the most realistic, let's say, or the best. But that doesn't mean we can switch off all our humanity and all the brain, right? So one thing is the emotional intelligence that cannot be lost with it. Another thing is like the critical thinking. Like if it's just, one of my colleagues always says, do you use this or do you use this? And if you use this, you're going to fail. So he means that if you just type, you're not going to get, and you're not going to learn anything. You're not going to get any knowledge. If you do this with this, you can.
Yeah, we are going very interesting times. I'm always in that case that, yes, I also use AI to take notes and get my time properly. But in the long term, am I using my brain more as well? And I just don't know. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. So it's very interesting times. And Julia, how can our audience get in touch with you and learn more about your consulting services as well?
I mean, just drop me a message on LinkedIn. I guess is the fastest way. Is the platform I probably use the most in general, and I'm happy to connect. And even if it's just like we did today, exchange some ideas and perspectives. That's already enough, because that is something I can bring to the classroom, which already helps me there. And then if that is something that is helpful to someone, perfect.
Thank you. Thank you for everything you do, actually, for the industry. Not only what you've done, the work you've done, but what you do with your students as well, and what you share on LinkedIn. The point of view that you have is very valuable, and I hope that you continue doing what you do, because you spread information that if people pay attention and are interested, you have a very cool point of view. You have a very nice opportunity, and what you share is very valuable. So thank you for what you do, and please just continue doing. I'll keep sharing.
Okay, thank you.
Schulerinos, thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.